Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are logging on from in the world, and welcome to this first Infrastructure Intelligence live webinar of 2022, organised today in association with the Association for Consultancy and Engineering and sponsored by our events partner, BECG. Today we're going to be looking at, I think, an issue that is certainly going to become of increasing importance as the government looks to speed up the delivery of its construction and infrastructure programme over the coming months and indeed coming years. And that issue is modern methods of construction and off-site manufacturing. And today we're here to launch a report, a briefing paper that ACE has actually produced as part of a series of briefing papers to give the government a little bit of a nudge, I dare say, about how it can better deliver its Project Speed agenda. You might remember Project Speed. It was mentioned in a blaze of glory, I think, by both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor towards the latter part of last year as part of their build, and build back better agendas. And I think, we really hopefully will start to see some delivery in that area in the near future. Modern methods of construction and off-site manufacturing will be key to the government's realising its ambitions in that area, and I think that's one of the things that this ACE report that we're going to talk about, amongst other things today, will actually go into. We'll also be looking at, with a very knowledgeable panel who know about this area, what needs to be done to increase the take-up of modern methods of construction and examine the implications for clients, consultants, contractors, and most importantly for the end user, who at the end of the day is going to be using these facilities in the first place and wants to see the benefit of them being built and developed and constructed in a different way. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, and that's Gita Davis, who's the head of policy for the Association for Consultancy and Engineering. Gita is a policy and public affairs specialist, currently working with the consultancy and engineering companies in the UK, who do a lot of work, as we all know, in the social and economic infrastructure sectors. Gita's got wide experience working in government, influencing and, dare I say it, sometimes cajoling politicians to do the right thing. He formerly worked in the Welsh Parliament as an assistant to the Chief Whip and as a senior advisor, and he also previously led the Welsh political department of Unite the Union. Anyway, Gita's going to talk today through some of the key points of ACE's latest report, and after all of our speakers have spoken, there'll be opportunity for conversation, discussion, and questions from the floor. But without further ado, Gita, take the floor, please.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. And after all the webinars that the ACE and I know other organisations did last year, it's great to be back, of course, with Infrastructure Intelligence. This is the first webinar I've done in 2022. Quite right, it's an Infrastructure Intelligence one. So thank you to you, Andy, and the team at Infrastructure Intelligence for hosting this event today, and of course to BECG as you highlighted. And I also just want to say a thanks in advance to our panel for their contributions. I'm sure they'll be fantastic, and I really appreciate them joining us today ahead of our Project Speed briefing on off-site manufacturing, which will be released publicly on Tuesday, but we will be talking through a lot of it today, as Andy mentioned. As Andy alluded to, my name's Gita Davis. I'm head of policy at the Association for Consultancy and Engineering. Now, it's fair to say a lot has happened since we first launched our Project Speed series. We did some documents on rail, on housing at the time, and a lot has changed since we started discussing this particular topic with our members. We've had new COVID variants, we've had COP26 and all the sort of talk around net zero targets, and of course more recently the publication of the government's levelling up white paper. I'll leave it to maybe people that have joined this call to decide whether that was worth waiting for. So let's get straight into it. I want to focus on those sort of three issues as themes for my contribution today. Conscious only got 5 minutes. So let's start on the key principle. You know, offsite manufacturing has many benefits, and they are developed in more depth throughout the paper. And I think it's fair to say offsite manufacturing has got quite a long history in the UK, but today has never really become the mainstream, and we're trying to change that through this paper. And yet the evidence shows that it can be a key method for addressing several issues that the UK faces, particularly achieving carbon net zero. And that's where I want to start today. So I'm of course really pleased that as part of AC's engagement with the Construction Leadership Council, the CLC, and the Construct Zero campaign, that optimising the use of modern methods construction is actually one of the headline commitments in the performance framework. And that's really important because it makes us really focus on the role that MMC can have in driving the net zero agenda, and getting the data and the information as part of the Construct Zero metrics is a great way to drive take-up in the industry. The fact that the BECG team and the government are very involved in the CLC and with Construct Zero as well also hopefully shows them that MMC has got a really important part to play in the net zero agenda. So hopefully that is a great start in driving the agenda forward. Let's focus on levelling up. I think any webinar in early 2022 that doesn't focus levelling up is going to be unique. If you've been able to get through the 300 odd pages of the document that was released last week, the government does have an opportunity to use offsite manufacturing to deliver on its ambitions. But it is quite disappointing that, given how much we say in the report about the link to levelling up, that there's no clear references to modern methods of construction and offsite manufacturing in the report. Obviously, there's a reference to some of those projects that could be delivered using those means, but I would have liked to have seen a bit more in there on that. Now, after all, you know, offsite manufacturing facilities can, within reason, of course, be anywhere. This enables locations of them to be in a better scope for recruitment into the industry. And that's linked to job creation, of course, so it means that it's not limited to wherever the development is located, but as we highlight in our paper, it can deliver economic growth over a broad geographical footprint, which is, of course, you know, the core of that levelling up agenda. Facilities can be located where the skills are, and probably most crucially where the jobs are needed. So this can be vital as the government looks to its levelling up initiative, however that manifests. We've got the paper, but obviously we need to see that in delivery. Another key benefit that we highlight in our report as part of that levelling up agenda is having a fixed, predictable place of work, is that employees can make use of public transport as well. So not only will this again make industry accessible for those that perhaps don't have private transport, but it also makes more vehicles, it takes more vehicles out of the daily, weekly site commute as well. So linking back to net zero. I think if we look at the government's 12 national missions that they released as part of that levelling up white paper last week, the very first is around productivity. And offsite manufacturing offers a number of ways to improve productivity, as we highlight in our paper. And I think we're starting to see a lot more of government initiatives and funding linked to those type of opportunities. So we had the Levelling Up Home Building Fund, for example, making a reference to offsite manufacturing, but it's really important that the government tries to join that up a bit better. Now, I think it's only fair to recognise some of the case studies that we've included in our paper, but also to say that the construction industry has gone through and is still going through, you know, some of the toughest conditions it's ever faced. So it was an industry that was already under pressure to modernise, already in desperate need for almost an image overhaul, I think, and then came obviously Brexit and the pandemic to worsen sort of labour shortages and create very volatile environment of contractor insolvencies and cost overruns and delays. But Despite that, I'm very clear in my mind, as is the AC as we outline in this paper, that government commitments on offsite need to be realised if we're to see offsite fulfilling its undoubted potential for better, greener and faster delivery in the built environment. Ambitions around levelling up, net zero, and in the more immediate term, that post-pandemic recovery could all be boosted thanks to a wider adoption of offsite, which not only has the potential to unlock social value, but offers the possibility for swift delivery. Now, we've got some recommendations in the paper, of course, around the construction playbook and the value toolkit, and I'm sure that will be discussed today, of course. Industry has an important role to play, primarily as a champion for offsite and the opportunities it unlocks to help overcome long-standing and outdated misconceptions around that approach. So fundamentally, that is what we are trying to do with that paper. Yes, nudge government, as Andy said, but also highlight some of the work that's already going on and trying to promote that use of offsite and MMC to the wider industry. So I'll leave it there, Andy. Looking forward to questions from yourself. Looking forward to hearing from other panelists and, of course, answering questions from those that are attending today. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Gitta. And I think it's really interesting that you actually linked up the net zero agenda and the effect that actually constructing offsite can actually have on that whole kind of area. And I think that's something, like you, I was a bit disappointed, although it's always a moot point how much detail white papers go into, although as we all know, there was quite a lot of detail in that levelling up white paper, including quite a lot of write-up about Florence, of all places. That's obviously the Italian city and not the magic roundabout character. But nevertheless, I think it's something that the government do need to get a grip on. Because in many ways, I think, there is real possibility in this area, not just to actually do things better, smarter and quicker, but actually to change the perception as well, I think, of construction and the way the industry works as a whole. But I think we'll certainly come back to that in the discussion. Our next speaker is Trudy Sully, who's the Impact Director at the Construction Innovation Hub. And for those of you that aren't aware of the brilliant work of the Construction Innovation Hub, I'd encourage you to actually go onto their website and have a look, because they are really leading the way in many of the cutting edge innovations of our industry. And indeed, Trudy herself has got extensive experience in innovation management and transformation programs, both in the public sector and in the private sector. And within the hub, she works very closely in collaboration with many of the stakeholders that we need to basically convince, influence around this whole issue of offsite, and that's government, academia, technology, and obviously the industry as a whole. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Trudy's got to say about this really important issue. So Trudy, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Andy. And again, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. These conversations are absolutely critical, and especially at the moment with this timing and where we are, to keep the agenda really at the forefront of everybody's mind. So yes, the Construction Innovation Hub, we are a 4-year, £75 million government-funded programme. And what we are here to do is to work under the remit of the construction sector deal and the industrial strategy, and to help create better outcomes for everyone through our built environment via the adoption of newly developed and evolving manufacturing and digital approaches that are designed to help improve the delivery, the resilience, the performance, the productivity we've mentioned already, all of which we know the challenges, we know where we've been, and we know that these things need to be addressed. So we're doing that through a range of different mechanisms to try and bring together a lot of these different elements. So we work around policy, regulation and standards. So working with the government, with the IPA, we've been really heavily involved with the development of things like the TIP roadmap and the construction playbook. And all of our activity is aligned to be able to support adoption of those processes and policies and to enable the industry to respond to. So there comes in for the technical solutions, for the market-ready tools, translation of experience that we've garnered from other sectors that we think are applicable and can help drive adoption of off-site approaches in construction, and then enabling the market, because there is this chicken and egg situation that we have, particularly in relation to delivering against public sector and social infrastructure needs, of bringing together the demand. We know we've got a huge pipeline of infrastructure that we need, but actually getting consistency in the requests and the information from that side so that the market can respond and build its capability and capacity to deliver against it. So this is why partnership and collaboration is key in driving this forward. So this is about levelling up, topic of the moment, absolutely rightly so. And there's been a shift in conversation. So where we were talking about offsite and manufacturing processes and MMC, there's sort of a slight shift because of this policy and because of the position we're in. That doesn't change any of the arguments here. It's just about realising the benefits in relation to those policies. So we're trying to do that translation as well to ensure that these things don't start to disappear off the agenda, even if they're not very explicitly mentioned in the papers. So through adoption of off-site manufacturing approaches for construction, what is totally achievable is enabling the disaggregated supply chain to respond to an aggregated demand pipeline. So that's taking words straight out of the playbook and the TIP roadmap and actually recognising it in the opportunity of that distributed manufacturing supply chain across the country, having the confidence to invest in developing their capabilities to deliver against the regional needs. And therefore realising some of those benefits that Gito mentioned, they're in the report. Mainstream, I'm not really sure what mainstream is or why mainstream is. I mean, if we talk about traditional construction compared to off-site, traditional has been, what, the last hundreds of years, and manufacturing and off-site approaches have been around for a long time, but not quite got there. Now, in reality, sorry for the way that I put this, but you can deliver crap off-site just as well as you can deliver it on site, okay? So it's not just about whether something is done traditionally on site or put together somewhere off site. It's about the processes, the consistency, the quality management, the assurance, and all of that is what needs to come together to ensure that what is being delivered meets those improvements in terms of productivity, performance, whole life value, and that ongoing building of the evidence to support the growth and the replication of this, and therefore the greater uptake by the client side to be able to deliver the needs that we have. So there's a lot around the terminology that we have to get over, and that's part of the work that we're doing too. But key for us with the Hub, we have another 8 months to go on this programme. And what we need to do is actually join a lot of these dots up. And there is so much going on, and it is such fantastic work. But what we need to do is bring together all of those case studies, bring the evidence forward, really showcase it, feed it back, show government the opportunity, and then create the right environment for that continued investment. I think that's probably enough to kick things off. And I'll hand back over to you, Andy.
Thanks very much, Trudy. And I think the point you finished on there about government's role in all of this as well. They can't stand by. They need to be engaged with the fact that there is actually a different way of doing things. And I think government's so important from a public sector procurement point of view. I think it needs to be made easier to actually do the right thing in this area. And I think that's why organisations like yours that have the ear of government are so important in that regard. And I hope and I trust that the work of the Hub will actually continue beyond the 8 months that you mentioned there, because that work is so important. Not just to the industry, although obviously we would say that wouldn't we? But it's actually important to society as well to do things actually in a different way. That whole levelling up agenda that Gita spoke about earlier on. So again, we'll come back, I'm sure, on some of those points in the discussion. Our next speaker is Ryan Lester, who's a project manager at the Global Property and Construction Consultants GLEADS that we just reported on in Infrastructure Intelligence a few weeks ago about a new group that they'd set up for emerging professionals within their organisation and for the wider industry. So kudos to them for actually doing that. But Ryan's actually going to talk about, in a practical sense, I think, the role that offsite manufacture has had from a project perspective, with particular reference to the successful delivery of the Grange University Hospital project. This hospital on the eastern side of Cwmbran is a dedicated centre for critical care and specialist services for Gwent and South Powys, and is really delivering in a practical sense and showing in a practical way how modern methods of construction can deliver an excellent project that is really being used by the local community. So Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Andy, and yeah, thank you for having me a part of this this really strong panel lineup today. So thanks for that. So as Andy mentioned, I'm a project manager from GLEADS, and I'll be briefly just talking to you about the role modern methods of construction and offsite manufacture had in the delivery of the Grange University Hospital. The Health Board's vision was to centralise their core specialist care facilities within the catchment areas, and the key element for them was the time frame for delivery of this. So with that in mind, I'll just talk through some of the key project specifics that drove their decision to use offsite manufacture. In terms of time and programme, so obviously the time factor was key in centralising their facilities and getting that facility set up and ready to roll with the community. In terms of the programme side of it, if we'd utilised a traditional build approach, the project programme would have had a duration of 179 weeks. However, going down the route of offsite manufacture, the Grange programme was 137 weeks, which was a 42-week saving, or 23% overall, which in terms of meeting the client's needs of delivering this in line with their clinical programme was again a massive factor in the decision to go down offsite. Despite facing the COVID pandemic, the project completed and became operationally live 5 months earlier than planned. And that was all in order to help support the Health Board in their battle against the pandemic. And without the collaborative nature built within the project teams, coupled with the use of offsite manufacturer, that just simply wouldn't have happened, and we would have been able to support them with that. Another key thing that the panel already mentioned is around the quality aspect of it. Obviously, from a client perspective, they always desire for the highest possible quality they can within the projects. One of the added benefits of offsite manufacture is how that quality management is involved, and therefore the quality of product finishes is far greater. Materials are manufactured within controlled environments, weather, human error have little to no impact, which again only drives up the improved quality. A testament to this is this project in itself, a 55,000 square metre hospital, which achieved completion with 0 defects listed, which is just an absolute incredible achievement by the whole project team. In terms of the cost side of it, so GLEADS undertook a value for money exercise to review traditional build versus offsite manufacture. And now, based on this project alone, the study showed that offsite manufacture was 0.5% more expensive than traditional build. And now, whilst in the general sense, 0.5% probably isn't a great deal, but obviously with a new hospital and the cost associated with building that, it's a lot of money. But this was offset by the programme savings and the desire for the Health Board to have that clinical programme delivered. And then just the last point then is around the improvement on safety. The supply chain partner undertook a time in motion study for the use of offsite manufacture, and it identified hundreds of thousands of on-site labour hours were removed by utilising this build method. So this alone reduced the likelihood of on-site accidents, whilst also responding to the industry skill shortage. The project was about 50% off-site manufacture in total, so therefore the need for less on-site labour, coupled with reduced on-site labour activity, drove down the number of on-site accidents. It is worth noting that, you know, for off-site manufacture to be a success, there is a requirement for significant design works up front. For the Grange, we achieved 80% design complete by starting on site. But you know, with all the clear benefits that delivers, from a client's perspective, after end user sign off, sometimes making significant changes can become more difficult to accommodate and therefore can come at a premium. But despite the project potentially not being at the ground yet, it can be a difficult thing for a client and end users to grasp that concept. But just to summarise, overall, the use of off-site manufacture for the Grange project was an overwhelming success, particularly in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And we truly believe that this should be the template for future projects. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Ryan. I mean, given some of the benefits that you've outlined there, it kind of raises a question in my mind straight away, is why wouldn't you do this? And why isn't it being encouraged more across the piece? We'll get to that in the conversation, I've no doubt. And there are some significant recommendations within the ACE report, Project Speed and Offsite Manufacturing, soon to be launched, around that particular issue. But I think, you know, what you've just highlighted there, excuse me, are undoubted advantages of going down that particular route. Our next speaker is Dan Hagan, who is the Technical Director and MMC Lead for Property and Buildings at the consultancy WSP. He's a structural engineering director with 20 years plus experience in the industry, and also has an expertise in mass timber construction and its application in modern methods of construction. Dan's going to give us a bit of an overview, might reflect on as well some of what Ryan's spoken about, but a bit of an overview on using how WSP is using the benefits of MMC to deliver UK infrastructure projects in a more timely and economic way. So Dan, over to you.
Yep, hello. So yeah, thanks for all the other speakers and their contribution. Like Ian suggested, I'm going to focus on our experience working on those projects. And as a structural engineer, I'm passionate about modern methods of construction, especially working with specialist contractors to realise that its benefits. Fortunately for me, MMC and DFMA is a key part of WSP's strategy, especially as it links to net zero carbon, sustainability and digital tools. And as a result, we're at the forefront of research and development into MMC. For example, we were the designers of the Berkeley modular system, which is a steel-based volumetric building system for residential apartments, which replaces the reinforced concrete solution that developer had as their go-to. We also work with Lang O'Rourke. We provide technical input to them for their reverting in situ frames to precast frames, which Ryan touched on in the hospitals there, like twin wall systems, like, you know, fully load bearing facade panels, you know, which reflects their kind of 70, 60, 30 approach that they tried to adopt on off-site construction. We also undertook technical due diligence for the Mace high-rise system, which is a kind of pseudo volumetric modular system based on the Australian Hickory building system. We're working with residential developers and contractors on the use of traditional and mass timber elemental and volumetric building systems. And we got strong relationships with specialist contractors, manufacturers, material suppliers, but as well as that, importantly, insurers. Insurance is a key part of MMC and its adoption, I would say. So we think that these relationships are the cornerstone to the successful implementation of MMC into a project, which talks both to the construction playbook and, you know, the supply chain and getting closer to the supply chain, but also the DFMA overlay to the REBA plan of work. Equally important is starting a project with the adoption of or incorporation of an MMC system in mind. This will provide the project with the correct massing and geometric parameters for the planning submission. And the role of the MMC advisor proposed in the DFMA overlay is an important step too. It provides overarching guidance to the design team in the early stages to steer the project towards potentially an MMC system by looking at site constraints, accessibility, supply chain, the capability of that supply chain, the local labour market, and as well as that, aligning specialist contractors and manufacturers with that project. It's also important to realise that you may not be able to incorporate a structural MMC system, for example, but there are other MMC systems like kitchen and bathroom pods, pre-manufactured MEP service runs, large format cladding panels, simplification of cladding systems, which are equally as beneficial to the project. So working with several modular manufacturers in steel and timber to assist in technically in developing their systems, and we're actively seeking other manufacturing partners to ensure there's healthy competition in the market. We're also engaging with the insurance market, like I said before, to educate them on MMC systems while ensuring our manufacturing partners have the requisite insurance to construct their products. That's probably the most important thing, more than getting the insurance on board. And in terms of projects, I obviously touched on the Barclay system, but alternatives in volumetric systems above 20 stories, for example, are very limited. And we recently gave advice to a client on a 45-story residential development where the client wanted to adopt MMC, but didn't want a volumetric modular system, as there's only 2 manufacturers at the moment that can build that tall. So we proved through intelligence we had from the UK's tallest volumetric tower, which is in Croydon, that you can shave almost a year off your superstructure program if you adopted the volumetric modular system, or 5 months if you looked at the platform or a panelized approach. And there was obviously, if you adopted the volumetric modular systems, lighter than the concrete frame solution, so therefore the substructure would have been smaller, and therefore there would be program benefits that way. Again, our work with Laing O'Rourke has seen us technically review in situ hospital schemes in order to revert them to precast solutions. An early example of that is Alderhay Children's Hospital, where there was 12,000 precast units, floors, columns, beams, but also facade panels were installed to construct the building. And as Ryan touched on, the Grange Hospital there, adopting precast over in situ meant that the hospital opened 5 months ahead of schedule in a global pandemic. There's not many people who've got a positive COVID program story. Also in the residential market, low-rise panelized systems such as Green Core Beyond panel, which offers amazing structural performance, coupled with the fact it's got the same or akin thermal performance of passive house. We're also driving the use of sustainable materials like mass timber, currently completing an entrance structure to Brent Cross West Station, which is a large glulam frame canopy structure. Again, engaging with the supply chain early, talking to insurers, developing long-term relationships to create a sustainable solution. Also, we're looking at refurbishing, renovating existing assets. Everybody's about refurbishment. We've got lots of buildings. Why don't we just renovate them? So adding floors, the norm to that would have been steel frame and composite deck a couple of years ago, but sustainability and net zero carbon is leading us down the way of looking at full mass timber extensions or hybrids with CLT floor slabs. This has weight benefits. On a recent scheme in London, we were able to add 3 floors to a low-rise concrete frame without needing to strengthen the columns or the foundations. And this solution can be adopted on new builds and has benefits on smaller substructure, or you could build taller, similar erection programs to steel and composite. However, the timber slab can be trafficked after laying instead of waiting for concrete to cure. And finally, obviously, the carbon benefits of this type of construction. And in terms of transport infrastructure, I noticed my colleague Benga is on this call. He was key in developing an MMC system for precast bridge abutments with Laing O'Rourke, which incorporates digital engineering. And this is also rolled out across the highways network now, won lots of awards. So in short, if that was short, the opportunities for adopting MMC on any type of project or sectors are endless, and positively endless as well. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Dan. Again, a wide sort of range of different projects that WSP is working on there in relation to Offsite. Just getting into the conversation now and the discussion, we've got about half an hour for that, and I just encourage people to post any questions in the chat. We've got a couple in there, and our panelists feel free to address one that's in there at the moment. But I just want to ask first of all about, what do you think the key barriers are at the moment to the widespread adoption of modern methods of construction, of offsite manufacturing? I'm going to put that question first of all to Trudy, if I may, and also what can we do about those barriers?
I mean, there are a number of barriers, but a lot of them are almost false now, I think. So some of the barriers are about what we were talking about in terms of the aggregated demand. So when you move towards offsite construction, we're talking about manufacturing processes, and to greater or lesser extent, factory type facilities to manufacture them. Now, the real benefits of this come with scale. So you need to be able to have a confidence in the pipeline and what you are going to deliver to be able to manufacture at sufficient volume to really get the benefits of investing in that environment. So a lot of the offsite manufacturing we see is relatively small scale because of the lack of clarity, the lack of frameworks, the lack of opportunity. I'm going to use the term tipping point. It's very popular at the moment. I'm going to use that because I think we are getting there. We've got things like the Crown Commercial Services Framework, which is being developed right now. That's a £10 billion offsite framework, huge opportunity. And we're working with Crown Commercial Services, looking at what that can be to help develop that capability and capacity. And I think that kind of thing is the biggest barrier. Also, as I said earlier, the evidence. We really need people to be shouting about these case studies and the stories where it's being deployed so we can prove it. Because unfortunately, for better or worse, in the world that we live in, bad news travels far and wide, whereas the good news, you have to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing.
Thanks very much for that, Trudy. I mean, just from your perspective, Ryan, I mean, obviously you've worked on a project that you quite eloquently showed what many of the benefits were for that. Again, constructed, lest we forget, during a pandemic as well. But what do you sense to be barriers towards the use of this approach, and also what can we do to address that?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting one, because I think, speaking from working with clients and thinking from their perspective, as the panel have already spoken about, modern methods of construction, this isn't anything new. This has been around for a long time, but I think from a client's perspective, their nervousness around the use of it's been around for a while, but like we said, it's never seemed to sort of shoot off and become the main approach. So thinking from their perspective of that, there is a nervousness around that of, oh, should we be doing it? It's not taking off. There must be reasons why. And as Trudy says, bad news travels far greater than good news. So I think, yeah, from that perspective, I think that's the reason why. And as you said, that the way around this is, and I know Gleeds, we've had a great experience with the Grange, as I'm sure Dan and WSP have, working with Lang O'Rourke and all their supply chain partners, and the success of this. And we are actively banging the drum and shouting out as loud as we can to anyone that will hear that about, this is positive, this is the way we need to go, and how we go about that. As I said in my little section, the Grange was 50% around that use of offsite manufacture, because at the time that was the risk appetite the Health Board and Welsh Government were willing to take with offsite manufacture. And now that we've been through this, it's been hugely successful, and the benefits of and all that have come out to light now. I think there is an appetite that we know far easily we can do greater. We can increase that to 60%, 70%, if not more. And I think there is an appetite now that the success story is there, the risk appetite for them will be far greater to push it.
Thanks, Ryan. I think this is getting to the hub of the matter here as well, or the nub of the matter even, or the hub of the matter. But anyway, I think what's interesting about this is about success stories and how do we communicate those, and are we doing enough as an industry to actually talk about that, or do we just move on to the next project? You can apply that to a lot of things that we do as an industry as well. But interestingly, there's a note just there in the chat from Kevin Brocklesby, and he says, why are we looking to government to drive things forward when actually, we can actually be that change ourselves as a sector? And actually, because obviously not all, as we know, construction spend is government driven. Obviously, a lot of it is, but not all of it is. So why aren't we doing more to promote this as an option? And I know this is something that Gita will have an opinion on, because it's actually in the report that ACE are launching around this issue. So, what can we do more as an industry to actually improve the situation, Gita?
Yeah, well, I think things like discussions like this go some way in doing that as well, doesn't it? In the report, Ryan and Dan have given some brilliant examples there. We've included 2 further examples in the paper as well. So one member, able to produce 250 housing modules per annum from a production line employing just 47 skilled and semi-skilled operatives. Ryan talked about the benefit of sort of reducing on-site accidents, or removing the amount of hours. We've got an example there around some of these methods used at Manchester Airport as well. So I think there are plenty of examples there. I think we're going back to your earlier question about what's stopping this being used more. I think we're probably in a good place whereby a lot of people want this to happen and want to use Offsite and MMC. So it's not a question that we're trying to convince people to use it. A lot of people want to. It's more about reducing the barriers. So I think that's a good place to be in some way. And just that question about, why wait for government? The industry proves time and time again, doesn't it, that they are innovators. They don't need to wait for government. But where government can help, I think things like the construction playbook go some way, and AC has been working a lot with the Construction Leadership Council, over the last year or so to try and promote the construction playbook and greater rollout of the construction playbook as well. There's a whole section in there on MMC, which shows the importance of it. So I think more things that we can do to identify, positive experiences, as Ryan said. Bad news travels quicker than good news, and Andy, you'll know as a journalist that as well. The more good examples we can promote, I think the better.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, this, how do we actually promote the benefits of this area? I mean, I'm mad keen to go and visit, some factories that are doing this work for whatever reason. I mean, obviously we had the pandemic, but even previous to that, for some reasons, it's proved quite difficult to actually get in there. I know they want to try to hide their light under a bushel. So that's just a generalised appeal from me, that I'd be delighted to actually go and visit some of these, factories that are producing stuff, from Offsite. But another thing for me, and this is something that's in the report, and it'd be interesting to see what the view of Dan is on this. In my mind, sometimes you can think, it's commoditizing construction if we go down this route. Does it mean that design is going to be restrained architecturally? Does it mean that we're going to end up with a load of bland projects because it's all been made in a factory? Again, I'm kind of being a little bit devil's advocate there, but I'm sure that some people would look at MMC and think, we want to create, want to be on site, want to be doing this. What's your view on that, Dan? Is that a real danger?
No, I totally disagree with that. I mean, the part of the confusion is that people see MMC as volumetric modular or modular. They call it modular, and actually that's only 10% of it. And actually, yes, modular, you could say, is something, because it's generally quite rectilinear. It could be construed as something that would be, quite boxy, but actually, apartment blocks are a bit boxy, and they are clad with, brick, for example. So actually, it doesn't really change how those apartments fit together, because they have to be squares or rectangles to fit all the rooms in them. So in terms of that, no. Whereas all the other elements, for example, panelized systems, they all go together. They can be whatever size you want, when you manufacture them. And obviously, the mass timber side of things, that is fabricated to whatever you want it to be. So it's just taking, some of those things that were done on site, off site, and done in a better way, and obviously, in a more controlled environment. I mean, to go back to barriers, that was a while ago, I did talk about the barrier of insurance, and I think the insurance market needs to come on board with this and understand all the different facets of MMC. I recently read a kind of internal memo inside a major insurer which talked about MMC as purely modular and CLT, and their attitude to that risk, whereas I'm sure they have a great attitude to panelized precast concrete solutions. So yeah, that's where I was going there. I did notice there was a question.
Well, just leave that for the minute, because I just want to come back on something else,
Yep.
and that's the issue of procurement.
Yeah.
And whether or not the procurement models that we've got currently properly support off-site manufacture, because this is a case where, I mean, obviously government's got a role to play there, but also the industry's got a role as well. Because at the end of the day, surely this comes down to clients. Surely this comes down to particularly private sector clients who allow the people that work for them to actually go down this route. And is enough being done in that particular area to encourage modern methods of construction and off-site manufacturing? And I don't know whether Trudy's got a view on that. I mean, are you finding that clients are willing not just to actually say, oh yeah, it sounds like a great idea, but go out there and do it and make it the norm?
Again, it's a moving feast, and it is shifting, and we've got some really positive experience of clients looking at this now, because we're starting to get those positive stories. It felt too risky to many of them, but now the mechanisms are starting to come into place. Eventually it's going to require completely holistic change. So we've got to look at the contracts, we've got to look at how the supply chains are structured, we've got to look at things like retentions, we've got to look at insurance, mortgages, and everything. And I think that has seemed too overwhelming. But because we have some positive stories, because we have the policy from government investment, it is starting to shift. There is a degree of patience needed here. But we have been working, so that you mentioned earlier, and it's in the report as well, reference to the value toolkit. We've worked with over 140 different organisations now to test that out, and had really fantastic feedback. And that's now being refined with the input from those clients, private and public sector, and the delivery side to refine it to be even more valuable. Sorry. And I'm going to shift back one, actually, and if you don't mind, because the question about why government rather than private sector, a huge pipeline, a massive pipeline, £60 billion a year of social infrastructure with a vast array of standardisation opportunities. So it's the mechanism, it's the leverage there. The other question related to that from the same guy was about why isn't the private sector sort of investing? And the private sector did it in automotive. Well, yeah, to an extent, but you know what? The construction industry so far from government has received £170 million through the sector deal for innovation investment. Automotive has received in excess of 4 billion, and aerospace in excess of 10 billion. So they have been through their transformations, but they had a vast amount of support to do it. So that is a mechanism that we need to keep pushing for and keep asking the government to help with this transformation.
I think it's interesting you mentioned those, that government assistance to those two sectors, because not that we want to get into a sector bun fight, but at the same time, these are sectors that are widely seen as quite cutting edge, certainly automotive. which has often been used as a paradigm for how industries can shift, how they can develop, how they've adopted new methods of working. But equally in the aerospace sector, which obviously you could argue can be seen as quite a sexy sector, if I can use that word. But I think, again, this comes back to how we promote our sector as an industry that delivers projects that change people's lives. What's more important than that? I mean, Ryan spoke about the hospital project, and we know that this industry is capable of actually working really, really quickly. The government, I mean, again, the end user story probably wasn't the best on this one, but then that's probably a good thing given what I'm going to talk about. And that was the Nightingale hospitals. They were built in no time at all. Thank goodness they weren't needed on one level, but it shows how quickly the construction sector can work. Now, obviously, they weren't all done on site. Some of them were, but equally MMC would have had a part of that. So I think that the story that we tell as an industry needs to be much clearer, and we need to be not backward in coming forward, as far as that's concerned. I mean, just going back to procurement for a second, I just want to ask, because it is a recommendation in the ACE report talking about improving procurement models. What's your view on that, Gitta, and how we do that both in the public sector and in the private sector? How can we change that situation?
Yeah, it's fundamental, isn't it? And that's why there's so much references to things like the construction playbook. I think there's probably more of an importance now after Professor David Mosey's review that was released just before Christmas. That I think is probably the latest and relevant document that gives a lot of the answers to government in terms of what is needed to change some of the barriers on procurement. We talk about how we promote uses of MMC and Offsite. That independent review of public sector construction frameworks has a section on modern methods of construction and offsite manufacturing and the benefits it can bring and how it can be used more effectively in those public sector construction frameworks. So again, I think things are on the right track. True, you mentioned earlier about just joining the dots, and sometimes we overcomplicate things, and it is maybe just about simplifying the process, and hopefully, and I know government has accepted some of those recommendations by David Mosey. Hopefully that will mean that when it comes to public sector construction frameworks, that the Offsite and MMC is used more. Andy, that would be my main point on that one.
Okay, thanks for that, Gitta. I just want to sort of ask, maybe moving towards the close of today's event, maybe a question for all of our panel, really, in terms of, it seems to me there's been a lot of talk here around getting clients to adopt this way of working. It seems to me that the people who've worked in this way are quite clear about its benefits. Again, I don't want to just reduce things to communication and promotion and everything else, but it seems to me that there is a story to be actually told around this issue in a better way. How do people think that we can actually tell that story better in order to influence the stakeholders that we need to influence to get greater adoption of MMC and Offsite? And I'm going to put that question, first of all, to Dan.
All right, then. I've got to take that question in. So how do we see that they can, adopt it? Sorry.
How can we tell the story better? How can we promote this better so that it's seen more clearly as something that needs to be done, and as brief as you can, really?
Yeah, all right then. I mean, how we do it is in our bid documents, we provide, as well as, structural or building services, early stage input to a project, we give them a kind of MMC health check of the whole project as well, to say, this is the kind of items that you can develop into your system. And for them, that might be, the first time that they've thought about that, or they might have, you know, ESG targets that mean that they have to focus on, you know, certain types of construction or certain types of ways of doing things, or, you know, they've got other factors that they, you know, got faster programs, etc., or they've got to build, you know, 20,000 units, and to do that in a traditional type of construction is just not possible. So yeah, it's kind of getting that early stage input into clients, you know, that strategic understanding of what their pipeline is. So yeah, that was my short answer.
Okay, thanks for that, Dan. Ryan, how do you think the industry can raise awareness around the benefits of MMC?
From my perspective, you know, there's only as an industry and as a consultancy, you know, we go out there, we're banging the drum about the success of an individual project, and you know that will take you so far. But from internally, my perspective of that is there's no greater feedback than clients telling other clients how good something was. So for me, the key is we've got to get them talking to each other, because I can say, you know, the Grange was such success, we used MMC, and clients that go, well, that's great. You know, perhaps you're just promoting it because, you know, you've got a bit of a niche in that area and that's what you want. But ultimately, if you get clients telling other clients, we used this, the success story was this, and this and this came out of it. For me, that's the ultimate driver of how this is going to go forward, is the short answer.
Okay, thanks for that. And to turn to yeah, sorry, I just thought I was on mute there for a second. Just to turn to Trudy, how do you think that we can actually tell that story better? And is enough being done at the moment? I know you're obviously at the cutting edge of that, and it's in your interest to highlight that to the wider world.
The real success of all of this, of everything we've spoken about, is through driving greater collaboration to overcome the challenges that we have. Collaboration drives innovation. And to actually work together and promote sort of consistently and promote other people. You know, we're on the programme at the Hub, we're really lucky that we've got significant competitors, from consultants through supply chain, tier one contractors, everybody working together to address those challenges and champion it in a unified way. And that builds those stories. And then when we've got the clients raving about the fantastic delivery, we've got the end users actually talking about it, because ultimately what we're doing is to improve the societal benefits for everybody using those buildings. So it's building those stories together and really sharing and championing it, rather than looking for opportunities to criticise and challenge.
Thanks very much for that, Trudy. And finally, Gita, I mean, from your perspective, and obviously you've got this report that's coming out on Tuesday. Obviously, this is a part of how we're actually raising the profile of MMC and Offsite. But you know, what more could be done, and what sort of things are HCE going to be doing going forward to highlight this more?
Well, I think first of all, just giving Ryan and Dan a bit more credit. You know, a lot of the projects HCE members and others work on, you know, they change lives, and in the case and the example that Ryan and Dan both mentioned, they save lives, and if MMC and Offsite delivers that, and government, clients and the public see that, I think that's possibly the greatest advertisement of its benefit. And it's, you know, communications is a big piece. That's, you know, I would take take more credit for that project, Ryan and Dan, definitely. I think in terms of what ACE can do, I think it's about us mobilising those case studies. You know, we are the eyes and ears of government. We are very fortunate to be around the room with many key stakeholders, particularly in government. The more that we can get our members in front of those key decision makers and tell their story, the better. So I would say to everybody on this call that's joined, if you're an ACE member and you have a project like the one that Ryan and Dan have talked about, let us know. When we publish these types of reports, we're constantly looking to update them as well. and include more case studies. So please reach out. As I said, you know, if we can show the true impact and the public impact, that's the best advertisement of its benefit.
Thanks very much, Gita, for that. And also to say, our door at Infrastructure Intelligence is always open to report on innovation, on new ways of doing things, and particularly where they've made such a benefit, a difference to people's lives. We know that social value is a massive issue going forward this year, and indeed for the foreseeable future. And our industry needs to embrace that as well. Some of the more technical questions that were put into the chat, we'll endeavour to get answers to you on those questions, maybe via ACE going forward. That all-important report, Project Speed and Offsite Manufacturing, is released on Tuesday, so look out for that. We'll be reporting on that in Infrastructure Intelligence. Just to say, for those that were expecting to see David Button here today from BECG to talk about their report on some of the barriers to offsite, unfortunately got taken ill overnight. I think he's okay, but he's wasn't well enough to join us, so he sends his apologies. All that remains for me to do is to thank all of our panel for their insights today, to Gita, to Trudy, to Ryan, and to Dan. We'll be reporting on this later on this afternoon on our website. You'll be able to watch again the webinar via our YouTube channel. Check out in our events section on Infrastructure Intelligence. We have a number of events throughout the year, pretty much one a month. There's going to be something there for everybody, I think, in our industry. So do make sure that you register for those. Thanks again to all of our panel for raising these issues. Look forward to that report coming out from ACE on Tuesday, and hope everybody has a great weekend. So thanks again, Gito, Trudy, Ryan, and Dan. And goodbye, and see you again soon at one of our Infrastructure Intelligence Live webinars. And thanks also again to our sponsors, BECG. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you all.